On Christmas Day, my daughter-in-law stood at the head of her beautifully staged table, smiled at 15 guests, and said, "Mom eats separately, she has a special diet." Then she had the caterer carry my plate to a folding table in the hallway, right between the coat rack and the boots. I want you to know up front that the hallway wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the blue folder sitting in my car the whole time, the one I'd almost decided to leave at home. The one that, 3 hours later, would be sitting in the exact center of her table where the centerpiece used to be. My name is Eleanor Winslow. Everyone calls me Ellie. I'm 74, and for 35 years I kept the books for half the small businesses in this town. The hardware store. 2 dentists. A flower shop that's now a nail salon. A little construction outfit that became a fairly big one because I caught a bookkeeper stealing from them in year 3 and nobody ever found out but me and the owner. I know numbers the way some women know recipes. I can look at a ledger for 10 minutes and tell you exactly where a business is lying to itself. And I can tell you, usually within the first 5 minutes of meeting someone, whether they're the kind of person who pays their debts or the kind who forgets they exist. I carry a blue folder everywhere. Have for decades. Force of habit from all those years of client meetings, when you never knew which invoice or which signed agreement you'd need to pull out at a moment's notice. My husband used to tease me about it. "Ellie," he'd say, "you'd bring that folder to a funeral if you thought someone owed you money." He wasn't wrong. I brought it to his. Walter passed 6 years ago. 38 years of marriage, and then a bad winter and a heart that had simply had enough. He was not a showy man. He drove a truck with 200,000 miles on it and refused to replace the radio even after it only picked up static. But Walter thought long. He was the one who insisted, back when Derek and Vanessa were house hunting, that we not just wish them luck. That we help. Really help. I'll get to exactly how in a moment, because it matters more than anything else in this story. People look at a woman my age carrying a plain folder and a purse with a broken clasp, and they see someone harmless. A little slow, maybe. Behind the times. My daughter-in-law looked at me and saw exactly that. I let her, because I learned a long time ago that being underestimated is its own kind of quiet advantage. But I spent 35 years watching business owners walk into my office in beautiful suits with books that were quietly bleeding out, and I watched a few, a precious few, walk in wearing work boots with books that were clean as a whistle. I know what real looks like. I know what performance looks like. And I knew, the moment my daughter-in-law told 15 strangers I had a special diet, exactly which one I was looking at. Let me start where it really starts, with the house. Derek is my only child. Good-hearted, easygoing, the kind of man who has spent his whole life smoothing things over rather than pushing back. He met Vanessa Caro 9 years ago. She was bright, ambitious, endlessly put together, the kind of woman who could walk into any room and rearrange the furniture in her head within 30 seconds of arriving. She started a small interior design business not long after they married. Caro Design Studio. Mostly staging homes for sale, some client work for young couples wanting their first real living room. It was modest at first. A card table in their spare bedroom, sample fabric swatches everywhere, invoices scrawled on the backs of paint chips. I offered to help her set up a proper bookkeeping system. She smiled the smile she gives people she's decided not to need. "That's sweet, Ellie, but I've got an app for that." She had an app. I had 35 years. We left it there. 2 years ago, Derek called me, voice careful in the way it gets when he's about to ask for something he's already decided he doesn't deserve. "Mom, Vanessa wants to expand. Real clients, real contracts. She needs starting capital. 85,000. We'd pay you back, obviously. Interest and everything, whatever's fair. We didn't want to go to a bank first." Walter had been gone 4 years by then, and the life insurance and the sale of our old house had left me comfortable in a way I never expected to be. Comfortable enough that $85,000, carefully documented, was something I could genuinely help with. I said yes. But I said yes the way I do everything. On paper. I sat Derek and Vanessa down at my kitchen table. I typed up a real promissory note, 4% interest, a repayment schedule stretched over 8 years, notarized, signed by all three of us. I built an amortization ledger the way I'd built them for 40 other clients over the decades. Every payment, every date, every dollar of principal and interest, laid out in a grid so clean you could frame it. Vanessa signed it without reading past the number. Derek signed it the way he signs everything Vanessa hands him. And I filed my copy in the blue folder, where it sat for 2 years, mostly forgotten, while Caro Design Studio grew from a card table into a business with an actual storefront, a small staff, and, as I would learn much too late, an entirely different origin story than the one written in my folder. I should tell you about Vanessa's mother, Denise, because she matters here too. Denise Caro measures the whole world in appearances. I've had exactly 4 conversations with her in 9 years, and in every single one she found a way to mention what something cost. The car in her driveway. The renovation on her kitchen. The private school her grandchildren from her other daughter attend. Denise raised Vanessa to believe that struggling, needing help, being ordinary, is a kind of contamination. That the worst thing that can happen to a woman is to be seen as someone who didn't do it all herself. I think, underneath the staging and the styling and the perfect Christmas card photos, Vanessa is a frightened woman. Frightened the way her mother taught her to be frightened. That if anyone looks closely enough, they'll see the $85,000 her mother-in-law lent her, and decide that nothing she's built is really hers. The cruel joke, of course, is that needing help doesn't make a thing less yours. Plenty of the most successful business owners I ever kept books for started with a loan from somebody who loved them. But Vanessa couldn't see that, because it doesn't fit the caption. She was about to build an entire evening around hiding it. She had no idea what I'd bring with me when she did. And I should tell you about my son, Derek, because the part of this story that still aches isn't Vanessa. It's him. Derek has spent his whole life avoiding conflict the way some men avoid ladders. He's kind. He's funny in a quiet way that reminds me painfully of his father. And when Vanessa took over the direction of their marriage, room by room, decision by decision, Derek simply stopped rowing against the current. It was easier. After his father died, Derek called me most Sundays, and some weeks I could hear, underneath the small talk, a man who knew things weren't right in his own house and had decided that noticing was the same as fixing. He knew where the $85,000 came from. He signed his name to it. Which is exactly why, when the truth finally came out at that table, it didn't just embarrass Vanessa. It broke something open in my son that had been sealed shut for years. Remember that when we get to the phone call. 2 weeks before Christmas, Vanessa called me directly, which she almost never does. Ellie, hi. So, quick thing about Christmas this year. Her voice had the bright, brittle cheer she uses when she's already decided something and is only informing you of it. We're doing it a little differently. It's actually going to double as a showcase dinner. I've got some very important people coming. 2 potential investors for the studio's expansion, a boutique retail buyer, a journalist from a regional lifestyle magazine doing a piece on women who built it themselves. She laughed a little at built it themselves, and I remember thinking, even then, that the laugh sounded like a woman stepping carefully around a hole she'd dug herself. So I just need everything to feel really curated this year. Neutral tones, you know? I've got the whole table designed around this concept of quiet luxury, warm beginnings. It's going to be gorgeous. That sounds like a lot of work, dear, I said. It is. Which is actually why I wanted to ask. A pause, the kind she uses before something she's rehearsed. Could you maybe just keep things simple this year? No family stories, nothing about, the business stuff, the loan, any of that. These are investors, Ellie. I need them to see the story I've built, not get confused by extra details. It's not personal. It's just optics. I sat with the phone against my ear for a moment. Of course, I said. I understand optics. I did understand. I understood a great deal more than she meant for me to. If you've ever been asked to shrink yourself for an evening so someone else's story could look tidier, if you've ever heard "it's not personal, it's just optics" and felt the floor tilt a little under those words, then you know exactly the feeling I'm describing. Type "I know that feeling" in the comments if you do. This is where it starts to turn. I hung up, and I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Something about the call didn't sit right, and 35 years of reading ledgers had taught me to trust that feeling. Numbers lie less than people, but people tell you they're lying if you listen closely enough. Vanessa hadn't said, "Don't embarrass me." She'd said, "Don't confuse them with extra details." The loan wasn't an embarrassing detail to hide from casual conversation. It was information investors would want. Information they would, frankly, be entitled to. So I did what I've done for every messy set of books that ever crossed my desk. I started pulling threads. My granddaughter Sophie is 16, sharp as a tack, and the only person in that household who still tells me the truth without editing it first. She'd been helping her mother prep for the showcase, building a little slideshow of before and after photos for the investor presentation. "Grandma," she said, when I picked her up for a dentist appointment the week before Christmas, "can I ask you something weird?" "Always." Mom's investor deck. It says Caro Design Studio was entirely self-funded through years of careful saving and a small business loan. "Is that true?" "Because I always thought." She trailed off, glancing at me sideways the way teenagers do when they already suspect the answer. I kept my eyes on the road. "What did you always think, sweetheart?" "I thought you and Grandpa Walter's money helped. Like, a lot. I remember you guys at the kitchen table with all that paperwork a couple years ago." I didn't answer her right away. I was doing arithmetic of a different kind, the kind where you weigh how much truth a 16-year-old should carry. "Some things are complicated, Sophie," I finally said. "But you have a good memory. Hold on to that." That conversation was the first thread. The second came from Harold Pruitt, a name I hadn't heard in 15 years until Sophie mentioned, almost as an aside, that some guy named Harold, he owns a hardware chain or something, was one of the 2 investors flying in for the Christmas showcase. Harold Pruitt. I did his books for 11 years, back when he had one struggling store and a business partner who was quietly draining the register. I was the one who caught it, the one who sat him down with a ledger and said, "Harold, someone here doesn't love this business as much as you do." He never forgot that. Neither did I. If Harold Pruitt was sitting at that Christmas table as an investor being told Vanessa built her studio entirely on her own, he was about to make a decision worth real money based on a story with a hole in it the size of $85,000. That wasn't gossip anymore. That was a due diligence problem, and I had spent 35 years being the person who caught exactly that kind of problem before it cost someone their savings. The third thread was the smallest and the sharpest. I asked Derek, gently, over the phone, how the loan repayments were going. There was a long pause. "Mom, we're a little behind. Vanessa said she'd handle catching it up before the year-end taxes. I think she's been folding it into other numbers. I honestly don't look at that stuff much anymore. She handles the books. She handles the books on an $85,000 loan from a woman who spent 35 years catching exactly the kind of person who handles the books a little too creatively." I didn't sleep well after that call. If any part of you has ever quietly followed a paper trail because your gut told you the story didn't match the numbers, stay with me, because this is where I started deciding what to do about it. I want to be fair to Vanessa here, because she isn't a cartoon, and the more of her story I understood, the sadder it became. Her father left when she was 9. Denise raised her alone on a receptionist's salary while dressing her like money, teaching her that appearances were armor and admitting you needed help was the same as admitting you'd lost. Vanessa didn't build a business on a lie because she's cruel. She built it because somewhere along the way, she decided that being seen as someone's charity case, even her own mother-in-law's, was a wound worse than actually lying about it. That doesn't make it right. It makes it human. And it's exactly the kind of human mistake that ends careers when it meets people like Harold Pruitt, who has no patience left in his life for founders who round the truth in their favor. I spent the days before Christmas doing the only thing I know how to do when the world feels unsteady. I got out my folder. I pulled the original promissory note, 4% interest, all 3 signatures, notarized. I pulled the amortization schedule I'd built 2 years earlier, updated now with a second column showing what had actually been paid against what was owed, a gap that had quietly grown to just over $11,000 in missed and shorted payments. I pulled the bank records showing the original wire transfer, $85,000, dated, timestamped, unmistakable. And I wrote 1 page in my own hand, because sometimes a ledger needs a sentence to go with it. Just a short note, the kind I used to leave for clients when the books told a story they didn't want to hear out loud. I slid it all into the blue folder and set it by my front door. Then I almost didn't take it. I want to be honest with you about that hour, because it's the part of this story I'm least proud of and most human in. I sat in my reading chair with the folder on my lap and Walter's photograph on the side table, and I thought about Derek's face if this went badly. I thought about Sophie, 16 years old, watching her parents unravel over a Christmas dinner. I thought, this isn't my fight. Let them have their evening. Stay in the hallway if that's what she wants. Eat your dinner. Go home. Keep the peace, the way you've kept it for 74 years. I actually stood up once to put the folder back in the drawer. But then I thought about Harold Pruitt, a good man about to hand over real money based on a story that erased the truth. I thought about $11,000 quietly disappearing into other numbers. I thought about a 16-year-old girl who already suspected the truth and was old enough to deserve better than watching the adults around her keep pretending. And I thought about Walter, who never once in 38 years let a bad number sit unspoken just because saying it out loud might be uncomfortable at the dinner table. I picked the folder back up. I put on my navy dress, the one with the small pearl buttons, and Walter's old reading glasses, the ones I still wear because the prescription happens to be close enough to mine and because putting them on makes me feel, for just a moment, like he's looking over my shoulder. And I drove to my son's house for Christmas dinner with a folder on the passenger seat where Walter used to sit. Big night, Walter, I said to the empty seat, the way I do sometimes. Let's see what the books say. The house looked like a magazine when I arrived. White candles in perfect rows, a table dressed in quiet luxury, warm beginnings exactly as promised, a professional photographer quietly circling with a camera, and 15 guests in the kind of clothes that know they're being photographed. Harold Pruitt was there, silver-haired, sharper-eyed than I remembered, sitting near the head of the table with the particular stillness of a man used to watching numbers before he watches faces. Vanessa met me at the door in a cream dress, radiant, rehearsed. Ellie. You made it. You look lovely. Her eyes flicked, just once, to my folder, and something in her face tightened, though she couldn't have known yet what was in it. Wouldn't miss it, dear, I said. Derek gave me a hug that lasted a half-second too long, the hug of a man bracing for weather he can feel coming but can't name. Dinner had barely begun, guests still finding their seats, when Vanessa clapped her hands lightly for attention and made the announcement that would end up defining this entire evening. Before we sit, I just want to say, this table tonight represents everything this studio has been about. Building something from nothing, with your own 2 hands, your own sacrifice. A small, practiced laugh. Speaking of hands and sacrifice, my mother-in-law, Ellie, is joining us tonight, but she actually has a pretty restrictive special diet these days, so we've got her set up separately so she's comfortable. Don't want her feeling rushed or crowded at the big table. A caterer I didn't recognize, young, uncertain, was already carrying a single plate toward the hallway, toward a folding table set up between the coat rack and a row of guest booths. 15 faces turned toward me with the soft, relieved pity people reserve for situations they don't want explained further. I do not have a special diet. I have never had a special diet. Vanessa has never once asked me what I can or can't eat. I understood, in that instant, precisely what I was looking at. A woman who could not risk her aging, plainly dressed mother-in-law sitting at a table full of investors and a journalist, in case anyone asked an innocent question about family, about help, about how a small design business with a card table 2 years ago now had a storefront and a staff. Easier to remove me from the frame entirely. Easier to make it look like kindness. I had a choice in that moment. I could have said, right there in front of 15 people, I don't have a special diet, Vanessa, and we both know it. I could have named the $85,000 on the spot. Part of me, the mother, the widow, the woman who'd spent 35 years refusing to let numbers get bent, wanted to. But I didn't. Because 3 things were true at once. 1. The folder was already in my bag, and Vanessa had no idea what was in it yet, which meant the truth would keep without a scene. 2. Harold Pruitt was sitting 6 feet away, and a shouting match would only make me look like the unstable relative she'd just described. And 3, this is the one that decided it. I understood that the cruelest, most effective consequence I could hand her wasn't a confrontation. It was letting her finish her performance completely, and then quietly setting the truth down exactly where the performance had been standing. Of course, dear, I said, my voice even. Whatever's easiest. I picked up my purse and my folder, and I walked to the hallway, past the coat rack, past a small forest of expensive boots, and I sat down at a folding table meant for holding gift bags, not people. I ate my Christmas dinner alone, off good china someone had at least thought to use, while 15 feet away I could hear my daughter-in-law telling a magazine writer about the sacrifices she'd made building her studio completely on her own, with nothing but grit. If you've ever eaten a holiday meal alone in another room while people who love you laughed just out of sight, you already know there's a particular kind of silence that settles over a folding table. It isn't sad exactly. It's clarifying. I unzipped my folder, right there next to the coats, and I read through it one more time, just to be sure of every number, the way I always double-check a client's file before I hand it over. $85,000, wired on a date in my own handwriting on the ledger. 4% interest. A repayment schedule signed by 3 people. A gap of $11,200 in missed and shorted payments. And my one handwritten page. I finished my dinner. I folded my napkin the way 40 years behind a desk teaches your hands to fold things, precisely, without thinking. And then I stood up, and I walked back into that beautiful dining room, past a woman filming a toast for a lifestyle magazine, and I set my blue folder down in the exact center of the table, where a floral centerpiece had been moved slightly to make room for the photographer's angle. Merry Christmas, everyone, I said, pleasantly, to the whole table. Vanessa, dear, I left something for you. I think Harold in particular might find it interesting. And then I picked up my coat from the hallway, and I left. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because it's the hinge of this whole story. I didn't wait to watch it land. I didn't need the scene. Some victories are quieter than that, and quieter, I've learned, lasts longer. I didn't cry until I was in the car. I sat in my driveway at home with the engine off, and I let myself feel every bit of that hallway, the boots, the pity in 15 faces, the particular loneliness of eating alone at your own family's Christmas while your daughter-in-law tells strangers a story with your help erased from it. I'm sorry, Walter, I whispered. I should have said something the second she called with that optics nonsense. But grief and clarity can share a car, same as they always have. By the time my tears stopped, something underneath them had gone very calm, very certain, the way still water lets you finally see the bottom. I wasn't sorry I'd left the folder. The phone rang 40 minutes later. It wasn't Derek. It was Sophie. Grandma, she said, and her voice had the electric, slightly guilty thrill of a teenager who has just watched adults implode. Grandma, you would not believe what just happened. I let her tell it, because I wanted to hear it from someone who'd actually watched. Harold Pruitt, she said, had opened the folder out of simple curiosity while Vanessa was still mid-toast, assuming it was a family recipe card or a holiday note. He'd gone very quiet reading it. Then he'd looked up, directly at Vanessa, and asked, in front of the journalist and the boutique buyer, whether it was true that the studio's initial capital had come from a family loan rather than personal savings and a bank loan, as her investor deck stated. Mom went white, Sophie said. She tried to laugh it off, said it was more of a gift. Really, family helps family, but Harold just kept reading, and then he read the part about the missed payments out loud, and Mom actually snapped at him that it wasn't relevant, and he said, real calm, Miss Caro, misrepresenting your capital structure to investors is about the most relevant thing there is. And your father? I asked. Where was your father through all this? There was a pause. Dad just sat there for a second, Sophie said, and then he stood up and said, she's right, Vanessa. It's not a gift. It's a loan. Grandma's carried us on it for 2 years and we've been behind on it, and you told people we didn't need help. That's not okay. I closed my eyes. 20 minutes after that, Derek called me himself, and his voice was already broken before he'd said a full sentence. Mom. A ragged breath. Mom, I am so sorry. I didn't know she was going to seat you in the hallway. I didn't know about the diet thing until it was already happening, and I froze. I always freeze. I know, sweetheart, I said gently. Harold Pruitt just read your folder out loud in front of everyone. He's talking about how this changes the whole due diligence conversation. The magazine writer is asking Vanessa follow-up questions she clearly wasn't prepared for. It's a mess. It's completely falling apart. I imagine it is. Why didn't you just tell me? His voice cracked. Any of it. The missed payments, any of it. I would have. You would have smoothed it over, Derek, I said, not unkindly. The way you always do. I didn't leave that folder to punish Vanessa. I left it because a woman who tells 15 strangers I have a special diet so she doesn't have to explain where her business came from is not a woman I trust to quietly keep hiding a debt from good people who deserve the truth before they write a check. He was quiet for a long moment. I let her put you in the hallway, he finally said. At Christmas. My own mother. And I didn't say a word until Harold made me. No, I agreed. You didn't. I'm done freezing, he said. I mean it this time. If you've ever waited years for the quiet person in your family to finally find their spine, you know how much it costs them to say a sentence like that, and how much it's worth when they finally mean it. Here's how it settled out over the weeks that followed, because I know you'd rather have the ledger than just the feeling. Harold Pruitt withdrew his investment interest within the week, not out of spite, he told me later on the phone, but because a founder who lies about her capital structure once will lie about her margins eventually. Ellie, you taught me that yourself years ago. The boutique buyer quietly did the same. The magazine piece on women who built it themselves was rewritten before publication into something considerably less flattering, focused instead on the risks of overstating your bootstrap story to investors. Caro Design Studio didn't collapse. It shrank back down to something closer to its honest size, a card table business with real clients and no more showcase dinners, which is, if I'm honest, probably closer to where it should have been all along. The $85,000 didn't disappear either. Derek insisted, over Vanessa's initial objections, on a real repayment plan, automatic, monthly, out of a joint account he now actually checks. The $11,000 gap was repaid within 4 months. Every payment since has been on time, because Derek, for the first time in 9 years, started looking at his own numbers instead of letting someone else handle them. Vanessa and I are careful with each other now. She has never fully apologized, not in the way I might have wanted, but she did, 3 months later, ask if I would come to actual family dinners going forward, at the real table, obviously, in a small voice that cost her something to use. I said yes. She has also, twice now, credited the loan out loud to new clients who ask how she got started. Small steps. I'll take them. Denise still mentions what things cost. Some people don't change, and I've stopped expecting her to. Derek is different in a way that runs deeper than one Christmas. He came to my kitchen table about a month later, sat where the folder used to sit, and said, I've been replaying that hallway over and over. I didn't fail you when I let her seat you out there. I failed you every time before that, every time I let her handle something instead of standing next to you while she did it. The hallway was just the one I couldn't unsee. That's a hard thing to know about yourself, I said. Why didn't you ever say it plainly, before all this? Because some things a man has to find for himself, Derek. I could have told you 1,000 times. It took a folder on a Christmas table to make you believe it. Sophie, for her part, has taken up an interest in bookkeeping I did not expect and thoroughly enjoy. She asks me questions about ledgers now the way other 16-year-olds ask about anything else that fascinates them. I suspect I know exactly who's inheriting the blue folder someday. This Christmas, the one coming up, will be at my house. I already told Derek, one table, everyone at it, no folding chairs by the coats for anybody, and no showcases dressed up as dinners. Because here's what I've learned, after 35 years of ledgers and 74 years of living, you can put a family member in a hallway for one evening, but you cannot keep the truth out there with them forever. Numbers catch up. So does love, eventually, if you're patient and if you keep the receipts. Love a business. Be proud of what you build. But never let pride talk you into erasing the people who actually helped you build it, because the people you erase are usually the ones holding the one piece of paper that tells the truth. I hope Vanessa keeps learning that. I hope Derek keeps his spine. And I hope that somewhere down the line, when Sophie is a grown woman running her own numbers, she remembers that her grandmother sat in a hallway once and answered it not with a raised voice, but with a folder, set down quietly, in exactly the right place. That's the whole inheritance, really. Not the $85,000. The proof that the truth, told calmly, outlasts any performance dressed up as a Christmas dinner. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever been the one seated by the coats while the family act played on without you, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. There's always another folder, another table, another quiet woman who knows exactly where the bodies, and the balance sheets, are buried.